By the early 1970s, Latin American economies were in trouble. Chile elected the Marxist president Salvador Allende. Allende's solution was not less government intervention, but more. Businesses were nationalized or expropriated. Price controls were imposed. Civil unrest grew as the economy spun out of control.
We have a tremendous inflation. Chilean society became extremely polarized. It's true, it was polarized before Allende, but during Allende's period, the society was extremely polarized.
It all ended in a military coup. As Air Force jets strafed the presidential palace, Allende was trapped inside. This was the last picture taken of him alive. Allende supporters, union leaders, and left-wing students were rounded up in the National Football Stadium. Hundreds were never seen again. Chile's military junta was led by General Augusto Pinochet. Many middle-class Chileans saw him as a savior.
I think that Pinochet's plan was basically the plan to manage an army. He didn't have an economic policy to manage the country.
After a year and a half of military government, you still had 20% per month built-in inflation that wouldn't go away until something structurally changed.
One of those who plotted the coup went to talk to Pinochet face to face.
I told him, "You've been called Chile's savior, but you will go down in history as the man that buried Chile." He was very shocked by this. And he said, "Okay, you've got 48 hours to come up with a national plan to fix the economy."
The only people who had a serious blueprint of how to get out of this were this group known as the Chicago Boys.
The Chicago Boys were a group of economists at Chile's Catholic University who had been sent to the University of Chicago as exchange students. There, they absorbed the ideas of the Chicago School of Economics with its almost revolutionary belief in free markets.
What characterized the Chicago School was a strong belief in minimal government and an emphasis on free market as a way to control the economy.
Professors like Arnold Harberger and Milton Friedman taught their students to mistrust state planning and government control. When the Chicago Boys returned to Chile, they brought with them ideas that were a direct challenge to the dependency theory.
This small group stayed together through the Allende years, and they used to meet, I think, every Tuesday for lunch. And they would keep kind of a running document which said how they would reform this economy, how this economy has to be reformed, what is to be done to get out of the swamp that they were putting themselves in.
Unfortunately, due to the idiosyncrasies of the military mind, the generals preferred a controlled economy. That is, an economy that would obey orders.
Javier Vial an influential businessman, sympathetic to the junta, was trying to push the military in the direction of the free market.
So I called Milton Friedman and invite him to come to Chile.
So Milton Friedman, the most famous free market economist in the world, came to lecture in Chile.
I went down to Chile and spent 5 days giving a series of lectures on Chilean problem, particularly the problem of inflation and how they should proceed to do something about it.
Friedman's first talk was at the Catholic University. His theme, the inescapable link between free markets and freedom.
The emphasis of that talk was that free markets would undermine political centralization and political control.
He said that you cannot have a repressive government for long within a genuinely free economic system.
But Friedman was also persuaded to visit the grim conference center from which Pinochet ruled Chile. Friedman told Pinochet that he needed to take decisive and immediate action to defeat inflation.
Friedman said, well, I'm going to give you an example. If you cut the tail to a dog in pieces, step by step, you will kill the dog. This is the same as inflation. You have to cut it at once, and then the country will start moving.
Milton's presence probably helped to stiffen the spine of people who were trying to insist on better economic policies. That's the period when the takeoff of the Chilean economy really began. The major reforms were made.
The junta called on the Chicago boys to rescue the economy. 500 state-owned businesses were privatized. Government budgets were cut. Import tariffs were swept away. The markets were given free rein.
The basic thrust was to increase exports and abolish artificial price controls.
Here was the first case in which you had a movement toward communism, which was replaced by a movement toward free markets.
There was much pain for the poorest. The cost of living went through the roof. The gap between rich and poor got wider and stayed that way.
They were starting a very deep process of transformation of the economy without any regard of what happened to people. And we ended up at one point in time with 30% unemployment rate.
According to the Chicago boys, the gain was worth the pain. Chile became the fastest growing economy in Latin America.
They were able to start a process of deregulating the markets, opening up the economy. So that's their contribution. They were able to anticipate a global trend. And Chile has benefited from that.
But at a price.
At a very high price. At a very, believe me, at a very high human price.